Hello and welcome to today's Oil for the Journey oil change. And I am your journey reader, Denise Joyner. And today's text from the readings were from Deuteronomy 22 through 25, chapters 20 through to 25. And as always, this journey reading has been brought to you by Ignite the Truth Bridge for Peace Bible Reading Plan. So, in reference to this oil change, which we're going to just dissect into the meaning, just giving an explanation for these Deuteronomical laws in chapters 22 through 25. And this is of no mere coincidence, but I actually preached a sermon on its New Testament cross-reference, Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32, this past Sunday. And those scriptures in Matthew 5, 27 through 32 deal with adultery and divorce. And Jesus was clarifying on or elaborating on the Deuteronomical law that he gave, that was given by the Father to the children of Israel in chapter 24 of Deuteronomy, verses 1 through 3. So, contextually, this is all law, basically, giving a bunch of do's and don'ts to the Israelites. Why was God giving them these laws? Well, the Deuteronomical laws on a whole and Levitical laws were given to keep Israel pure and keep them sanctified, if you will, set apart for the Lord's use when they reached the promised land. Remember, they were journeying from Egypt onto the promised land in Canaan. And on their journey, they met Amalekites, Moabites, Canaanites, and these were all pagan societies. And the key for knowing that is that those societies would because remember, it was a 40-year journey. Those societies would infiltrate the Israelites with their ceremonial laws, pagan laws. They worshipped idols, and they just did some really crazy things. Like Canaanites practiced cannibalism, for example. They did prostitution and orgies as fertility rituals to their idol gods. So all of this was surrounding the Israelites, and the Father wanted to keep his children pure. So he gave laws and basically said do's and don'ts so that they wouldn't follow them and copy those pagan ways. Similar to today, but I digress for now. So if you look at chapter 22 and 23 of Deuteronomy, these laws mainly had to do with respect for people's property. If you saw your neighbor's cattle or sheep, lost, or you got to return it back, So it was a respect for property. Also, one thing that stands out is, I think it's chapter 23, verse 9, where it says that it's detestable unto the Lord to cross-dress. And, again, this is to keep them impure. I don't think it was verse 9, but needless to say, it's to keep them from being impure, the Israelites from being impure. The neighboring and foreign countries and peoples used to cross-dress as a means of confusing the gender of the cross-dresser, and they would do this again for pagan worship. And God the Father was like, no, don't do that. Be you. Represent truthfully, honestly who you were created to be. That's important, and that has tremendous implications for the time we are living in right now. And so getting back to fast forwarding to chapter 24, verses 1 through 3, the divorce laws. And these are really the only place in the whole entire Bible where the divorce law was specific. And Jesus again elaborated on it in Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 and 32. And if you read the laws, they were geared to protect the woman. So all of these divorce laws, even adultery laws, even rape, were geared to protect the woman. And there's a couple of scriptures before that in Deuteronomy 23 toward the end. It basically says that if a woman was raped, that man should be stoned to death. All right. And then it also talks about if a woman was considered, in quotes, to be raped in the countryside and she never screamed, then that man was to be punished. Now, if she screamed and she was out in the countryside, nobody can hear her, and then obviously she was raped, and they used, signs, which was basically the remnants of sexual intercourse, which would be left on sheet and clothing to determine if the woman was raped or not. But needless to say, it was all to protect the woman. And similarly to the divorce laws, it's not that you cannot divorce and remarry. It was that they were using cavalier means. Remember, only the men, the husbands, gave divorce in those times in the ancient world. And the men also were the ones that went and pursued the woman in the ancient times. But what that means is that woman didn't have any say. And if for any reason this man wanted to divorce his wife, then he would leave her open for adultery should another man decide to marry his ex-wife. Moreover, Jesus was in Matthew 5 and similar in this text in Deuteronomy 24, God wants to promote marriage fidelity, not committing adultery, and then also monogamy. They were surrounded by pagan religions and pagan nations and peoples that practiced polygamy and that practiced, all kinds of sexual deviances. Monogamy and monotheism were the main themes in terms of sexual wholeness and worship for Yahweh, for the Israelite God, Yahweh. Just because other Old Testament figures had many wives does not mean that that was what God wanted or condoned. Here in this Deuteronomical text, you see that monogamy was condoned. But how they got over it, if you will, these men, because of their lusts or maybe even greed, wanting the dowries of these wives, they would divorce them just for any old reason. I mean, they could have burnt the toast and then they'd get a certificate of divorce and say she can go on. And God is just saying, no, you cannot do that. Stay with the wife whom you've married and be truthful with her, respecting her and protecting her from adultery as well. So, it's not that divorce and remarriage is forbidden in the Bible. It's that God wants fidelity. God wants reconciliation in a marital relationship. And moreover, in having so, divorces that are cavalier and for petty reasons should not be entertained or condoned, because those divorces are really like committing adultery. They have nothing to do with someone who stepped out in a marriage and stepped out and committed adultery or some sort of sexual sin. Okay, I hope I made that clear. But thank you for joining me today, and may God bless you as the reader and hearer of His holy word.